Welcome, everybody, to Crystal Kyle and Friends. Today, I'm super excited to be talking to a brilliant writer who I admire very much, Luke Savage. Luke, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, cheers, and thanks for that nice introduction. It's good to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, all right, a lot of stuff to talk about. Um, so obviously, Trump the other day, a month ago, he threatened tariffs, and then at the last minute, sort of backed off of it. And that was sort of curious for a number of reasons. But then a month later, he stayed true to that promise and effectively put these tariffs in place against both Canada and Mexico. You're a Canadian. I'm curious your thoughts on that. But also, we literally 2 minutes before I came on air here with you, I just saw the news. Then now he's saying, oh, we might, all the goods that are covered by the USMCA, which is NAFTA 2.0, basically, we might exempt all of those goods, which my understanding is like that's almost every good that comes from Canada. So it's like,
Right.
what are we doing here? What the hell is going on? Tell people your theory on this.
Yeah, I mean, it's extraordinary because, I mean, I hadn't even seen this news from a few minutes ago. But I mean, if that's now the line, that's as good as saying, like, we're not doing the trade war. I mean, that's, you know, yeah, I mean, I think interpreting Trump's actions here is pretty difficult because, yeah, there's so much inconsistency in the messaging. I mean, cards on the table, as soon as Trump first kind of dangled this tariff policy, which I think was in a Truth Social post after he won re-election in November, so before he'd been inaugurated. Um, I was very skeptical then, and I remain very skeptical of the idea that the United States is going to maintain basically 25% tariffs across the board on Canadian goods. And, you know, I think it's 10% tariffs for energy because, of course, Canada exports a lot of its oil to the United States. I mean, you know, we've seen both, we saw both the first Trump administration and after the Biden administration kind of flirt with forms of industrial policy and maybe mild economic protectionism of a kind we haven't seen in a while, or for a very long time out of the United States. But I mean, 25% tariffs across the board with the United States as biggest trading partner. Like, factories aren't going to just spring up in Michigan and Ohio and Pennsylvania overnight. You know, this is going to have an absolutely devastating impact on, U.S. businesses, on American consumers. You know, prices will be massively spiked, massively inflated, and in a very brief span of time, right? Much quicker. That's going to happen much more quickly than steel manufacturing is going to pop up, to or whatever. So, this is not going to work unless Trump has something up his sleeve that we don't know about. And I think that's one of the reasons why there's such kind of a chaotic rollout of this thing. I mean, right after the tariffs, I mean, I think within maybe a little more than 24 hours of the tariffs actually finally being put on the books earlier this week, they announced a carve out for auto, right? Like right away. Oh, we're actually delaying these by a month, and that's before what you've just told me. So, yeah, I mean, I think. Interpreting Trump's strategy here, if there is a strategy, is kind of difficult. I wrote a Substack piece recently where I'm trying to, like, I think we have to interpret Trump's belligerence on the trade front with the other things he's doing. It's a piece with what Elon Musk is doing with Doge. It's a piece with the kind of bigger geopolitical realignment of the United States that he is undertaking. I think it's all part and parcel of this kind of neo-imperialism that Trump's doing. That's maybe another conversation, but I think it kind of has to be seen as a part of that. It is a type of sort of aggressive and belligerent shakedown of other countries, and particularly American allies, of the kind we haven't seen before.
So here are my thoughts on it, and I'm curious what you make of it. I can see three potential reasons why Trump would do this. The first one is, and this is probably the kindest reading to him, that it's truly and sincerely ideological. He's repeatedly said, like, the 1890s were the best time, and we had tremendously high tariffs, and everything was great. He said that a lot. So it could be that. And in that same bucket, I would also put stupidity and incompetence, because if he's
Yes.
truly ideologically married to this, it's really, really dumb. So that's one option. That's like the kindest one. Then you have the harshest one, which, you know, the liberals would go wild with, which is the idea of he's a foreign asset and he's trying to tank the United States of America. And if you're trying to do that, you would do this, right? And then there's the one that I sort of I lean towards this one, and I'm curious your thoughts. And Crystal did a TikTok on this the other day, and I listened to it, and I was like, damn, that's actually a really convincing case. But there's an argument for doing this for personal profit. So, you know, he knows, hey, when I announce these tariffs, the markets are going to tank. Him and all of his donors and robber baron buddies can short the market and make a tremendous amount of money. I mean, they can make billions of dollars in a really short time frame. That's one reason. And then that also goes hand in hand with, if he truly crashes the economy, you can let the robber barons swoop in and buy everything up on the cheap. And then that does get this country back to what Trump views as like an ideal, which is have like 10 people own everything, and those 10 people are loyal to him, and everybody else is effectively a corporate slave or a peasant. And so I'm curious what you make of that. Which one of those things do you think is most likely to be, you know, the reason why he's doing it?
I think it's a little from column A and a little from column C. I mean, the foreign asset thing. I mean, this is just this is part of the way that liberals, right, since 2016, have psychologically metabolized the Trump, presidency, right? Like this can't be something indigenous to the American body politic, right? It has to be something imposed from without, and that's, we know what we think of that. That's very silly. If Trump, like, who's literally a product of American TV entertainment, and like,
he's the most American person on the planet, basically.
Absolutely. So we know what we think of that. I mean, it is funny, like, just to speak to the first of those possibilities, like whoever told Trump about William McKinley, like, I want to know, because I don't think Trump knew about William McKinley in his first presidency. And like, whoever kind of sold him on this romantic vision of like 19th century American imperialism, where like you could have high tariffs, but they were actually like then supported by big business because big business wanted to be insulated from competition. Like, whereas, by the end of the 20th century, like, American big business doesn't need to. Like, the United States controls the global marketplace, so they want to eliminate other people's tariff barriers. But I mean, I'm really intrigued by Crystal's thesis about what's going on here, and I mean, that is certainly that certainly syncs up with what's going on with Doge, right? Where this is just kind of a with that, I mean, it's literally just the plutocrats looting the federal government. So this is not lobbying anymore. This is not, buying legislation with campaign donations or something like that. This is taking it a step further, where it's like, we just need to dominate and capture the state, strip it for copper wiring, sell it for parts, whatever. There could very well be something else or something similar going on with these tariffs. I mean, I think if there's one thing that unites or kind of makes coherent Trump 2.0, it's a politics of like pure plutocratic transaction. Like, that is, there's no artifice to this anymore. I mean, I've been struck by how little Trump even seems to be really trying to pretend that this is part of like a Make America Great Again agenda anymore. Like, I guess he gestures at that, but like, the messaging now, it seems like, is much more, Americans better get ready to feel some pain, right?
Yeah, that's right. There's going to be disturbances, he said the other day. Yeah, there'll be some disturbances. Like, what?
There's going to be disturbances, whereas you compare that to Trump's rhetoric when he renegotiated NAFTA, which was, I mean, one of the ironies we haven't even spoken about here is that, Trump saying that he's getting, the United States is getting ripped off by Canada and Mexico. If that's the case, well, why did he sign, why did he sign a free trade agreement and call it like, and renegotiate NAFTA himself, and then say this is the best free trade agreement ever? Like, that was what, 6 years ago or something?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's a lot going on here. And I think, as always with anything to do with Trump, there's always a meta debate to be had about, to what extent is this sort of pure reflex versus conscious strategy. I lean to
Right.
work more towards pure reflex, but in some, like in important ways, it's completely irrelevant. It's like we know what's going on here. Yeah, this is stripping and selling the American state for parts, and possibly igniting a trade war for with similar motivations in mind.
You made an interesting point in your piece about how Trump doesn't seem to understand trade deficits. And lay that out for everybody, because that's actually something, it didn't occur to me until I read your piece, and I was like, that's actually a really good point.
Yeah, I mean, so to me, there's I mean, the trade war and the sort of responses to it on both sides of the border from the political class are pretty ironic because, here in Canada, I in a sense understand the reaction because with the trade war, we've got, this rhetoric of annexation and stuff. I understand that people are disturbed by that, but I think, the Canadian political mainstream treating free trade with the United States as if it's this like this economic nirvana that we should want to maintain at all costs. I mean, that would have been very controversial in Canada before the late 1980s when, the free trade, we fought a whole federal election on the issue of free trade, because it was widely understood that free trade is really about turning Canada into an economic satellite of the United States, into an economy where we lose out on a lot of quality manufacturing jobs. We're incredibly export focused. Like Canada's very natural resource rich, right? But we don't refine our oil here. We don't. There's a lot of domestic manufacturing, like auto, which we do have, which is just an extension of American business. It's kind of a it's a branch plant of American business. That was the terminology people used to use. So there's a certain irony from the Canadian side, and that's mirrored in Trump's view of all this. I feel like he's a guy who thinks in terms of like TV ratings, right? So when he sees a negative number, when he hears, we have a trade deficit, well, a deficit's bad. You want to have a surplus. Surplus is more. It's big. It's beautiful. It's better. Like that's how his brain works, right? So, but like what he's not understanding here is like the fact that the United States is an import dependent economy is like in a sense the success of America as an imperial project, right? Like the United States under successive administrations has built an economy where I think nearly 70% of GDP as per 2024 is just consumer spending, right? And that's the success of imperial planning, right? Like the goal was to create an economy where American consumers get low prices, other people make things for bargain basement wages in many cases, and that subsidizes in a sense American consumers. The American economy is sustained through free trade and cheap labor and imports. Not just from Canada and Mexico, but from China as well, although we know that's been changing as the Chinese economy has grown and as China's gotten stronger. So there's a lot that Trump doesn't understand here. And I'm not even fully sure he understands that like a critical part of the Republican coalition, which is just big business and,
Right.
the Wall Street Journal editorial board and you name it, they don't support these tariffs because they advocated for free trade. They lobbied for it for a reason, because they knew that it was in the interest of American big business. And I think more than anything else, this is what makes me think that what we are dealing with here is not a permanent renegotiation of the North American trade consensus, where the United States becomes like a heavily protectionist economy, because we saw in the first Trump term, one of the things Trumpism has been really unwilling to do is discipline capital, right?
Right.
The thing that in 2016 potentially made something like the Steve Bannonite vision of Trumpism scary was that it was going to be a type of right-wing politics that disciplines capital. And Trumpism has not to date really been that, right? His biggest achievement of his first presidency, at least on the legislative front, was like the giant tax cut that Republicans have been seeking for 20 years. And I feel like, what we're dealing with Trump now is maybe different than Trump 1.0, but I'm not sure that, Trump is going to be any more, any stronger in his conviction to discipline American capital.
He genuinely seems to think, or at least he says it all the time, that doing these tariffs is going to lead to an immediate American manufacturing boom. And it's so hard for me to swallow the idea that he can actually be that stupid, because obviously the other part of the equation is centralized industrial policy and massive government subsidizing of whatever industries you want to flourish. And so I don't know if he really believes it or not, but it's going to be a real cold dose of reality when, if he were to keep these in place for an extended period of time. It's like you're looking at stagflation guaranteed, right? There was a video on Fox Business of some reporter at a car dealership. Like, you see this Ram pickup truck? It was $80,000 a minute ago. Now it just became $100,000 because the tariffs went into effect. And it's like, I don't think this country cannot survive, the United States, another round of neoliberalism. We're already at the breaking point. We already have some of the most meager social safety nets in the world among developed countries. And I don't think they realize just how much they're playing with fire.
I completely agree. And I mean, I would take it even a step further, because it's not just another round of neoliberalism we're talking about here. It's actually like directly transgressing against like the neoliberal social contract. Because what is American neoliberal ideology distilled, right? It's, we're going to maintain this hideous empire that's going to do awful things abroad. We're not going to have, we're not going to fund anything like a European welfare state, or even a Canadian one, which is less than a European welfare state. But you are going to get low prices when you shop at Walmart. If you are a working class or middle class person, you're going to get you're going to be able to buy stuff in a way that like people in other countries are not. Actually, this brings to mind maybe my favorite Matt Iglesias tweet ever. I don't usually bring him up in casual conversation, but he's relevant here. I think this was back in 2016, and he was responding to something. Someone was basically complaining about how expensive things were when they went to, some wonk was saying, oh, we did a vacation to Norway or something. We couldn't believe how expensive the food was. And Iglesias replied to the effect that this is basically our takeaway. Like, when we went out in Copenhagen, we paid $40 for like, at like a middling restaurant for Thai food or something. And I mean, that's an insane thing to say, but I feel like that does reflect something very deep in, I don't know, a certain, like the neoliberal psyche, right? It's like, oh, it's worth not having, Scandinavian levels of employment and union density and social expenditure, because, hey, like when we go out to get Thai food in Cincinnati, it's not $40. I mean, that, and so what Trump is doing is, as you said, is going to, there's going to be massive stagflation. There's going to be economic contraction on a really considerable scale, and people are going to be paying way more for basic goods, as are businesses themselves, like businesses, not just consumers. So this just so clearly isn't going to fly.
Let me ask you this: what's your reaction to what I would call the Trump warmongering? I mean, it's obvious that certain threats pack more of a punch than others. So, for example, when he says we're going to take Panama, like I believe him. I think he's going to try to take Panama. In fact, there was a story the other day that Wall Street is now involved, and it was either Blackstone or BlackRock got the rights to part of the Panama Canal. But anyway, and Gaza, same thing. I believe him when he says that we're already arming and funding a genocide over there. Greenland, like I think he'll try, but I think it'll be it's slightly less likely to happen. But the one that seems the most preposterous of them all, of course, is the 51st state threat that he's put on Canada. But the thing that's kind of shocking and jarring to me is that he keeps saying it. He keeps saying Governor Trudeau, the 51st state. He's now got Kristi Noem doing the same thing. Like, all the Republicans are now hopping on board. What do you make as a Canadian when you hear this and you see this? Like, what's your reaction to this, and what's the reaction of your fellow Canadians when they hear this?